Hi, my name is Rose Cioffi, and through my research, I sought to identify a novel and more effective method of stress reduction in adolescents. Now, over the past 2 decades, rates of adolescent anxiety and stress have seen a stark and alarming uptick, which is particularly concerning given the negative impact associated with anxiety and stress. Thus, there is a pressing need for the development of more engaging, non pharmaceutical methods of adolescent stress reduction. Now, exercise and virtual reality, both independently and in tandem, have been pinpointed as two such methods. Research has indicated that chronic or consistent exercise is effective in reducing stress and improving executive function. However, the problem with chronic exercise alone is that many adolescents lack the time, motivation, or desire to exercise regularly. Researchers also found that virtual reality immersion is effective in immediately reducing symptoms of anxiety. However, the scope of this research is limited as it has mostly focused on the adult population. Researchers also found that adolescents who engaged in exercise in conjunction with VR reported an immediate reduction in symptoms of stress and anxiety and improvements in executive function. However, the effect of chronic or consistent exercise with VR remains unexplored. Now, research has indicated that individuals are more likely to maintain healthy exercise habits if exercise is paired with VR. Now, this trend may be more pronounced in adolescents who generally have a higher affinity for video games. However, few studies have actually quantified enjoyment in regards to exercise with VR. So, in response to these gaps, the purpose of my study was twofold. I first sought to determine the impact of chronic exercise with VR on anxiety, stress, and executive function in a cohort of adolescents. And I hypothesized that adolescents who participate in chronic exercise with VR would report reductions in anxiety and stress and improvements in executive function. And I also sought to determine if adolescents who engage in exercise with VR report higher levels of enjoyment than those who engage in traditional exercise. And I hypothesized that adolescents who participate in exercise with VR would report higher levels of enjoyment. Now, to do this, I recruited 42 high school students from a local high school who were then randomized into one of three cohorts: a VR cohort, an exercise cohort, and a non intervention control group. Now, over the course of my study, the VR and exercise groups completed 15 exercise sessions, either with or without VR, while the control group engaged in no exercise in relation to this study. All cohorts, however, completed the outcome measures for the study over the same interval. My study took place for 3 weeks over the summer, and over the course of these 3 weeks, those in the VR and exercise groups completed 15 exercise sessions, each 10 minutes long, and these occurred on each weekday. All cohorts completed 5 rounds of anxiety and stress questionnaires, once at a baseline examination, at 3 weekly checkpoints, and at a follow-up 1 week after the culmination of exercise session. All cohorts also completed executive function tests on the first day of the study and on the last day of the study. And I took a novel approach in my experimental design by being one of the first studies to examine the impact of chronic exercise with VR. Now, those in the VR group exercised with the box VR game, which was 10 minutes long, while those in the traditional exercise group followed a 10-minute guided boxing video on YouTube. And I again took a novel approach here, as I am one of the first to use Oculus Rift off-the-shelf games, such as box VR, in a school setting. The outcome measures for my study include the pediatric anxiety short form, the psychological stress experiences short form, the trail making test, the physical activity enjoyment scale, and heart rate. And I again took a novel approach here, as I am one of the first to quantify enjoyment, specifically using the physical activity enjoyment scale to exercise with VR in a population of adolescents. Now, all data was stored in Microsoft Excel and then exported to SPSS Statistics and GraphPad Prism 9 for further analysis. The demographic variables probed in my study include age, number of females, and exercise hours per week. And my first finding is that neither the VR or exercise groups experienced significant reductions in stress between baseline and week 3, which indicates that exercise with VR was not effective in reducing anxiety. However, I found that the VR group and only the VR group experienced a statistically significant reduction in stress between baseline and week 3, which is when exercise sessions stopped. So you can see here, the VR group, which is the blue line, saw a steady reduction in stress. However, what is perhaps most interesting is that I saw a continued decrease in stress in the VR group between week 3, which is when exercise session stopped, and the follow-up checkpoint, indicating that exercise with VR was not only effective in reducing adolescent stress as exercise was being actively completed, but continued to be for at least 1 week after the culmination of exercise sessions. Now, I also found that all cohorts, including non-intervention control, displayed reductions in time needed to complete trail making test A, indicative of improvements in executive function. However, on trail making test B, which is considered to be both harder and more reliable, I found that only the VR group experienced improvements in executive function, indicating that exercise with VR was effective in improving executive function, specifically on trail making test B. I found that the VR group reported significantly higher levels of enjoyment than the traditional exercise group, and I found that the traditional exercise group reported a larger mean difference in heart rate from pre to post exercise than the VR group. So my major finding here was that adolescents found exercise with VR to be more engaging and enjoyable than traditional exercise. Now, perhaps one of my most interesting findings is that I observed a continued decrease in stress for 1 week after the culmination of exercise sessions in the VR group. Now, this is consistent with previous literature, including DiLorenzo et al. 1999, and indicates that the benefits associated with chronic exercise, with and without VR, persist after the culmination of exercise session. However, my study and previous studies are limited in that they've only included limited follow-up checkpoints. Thus, future research that includes multiple follow-up checkpoints is warranted to determine the longevity of such benefits. I also observed that all cohorts, including the control, displayed a reduction in time needed to complete trial making test A, indicative of a learning effect, which is when an individual will perform better on a cognitive exam, not because their cognition has actually improved, but because they've seen the test before and know what to expect. This is also consistent with previous literature, as Shaw et al. 2021 observed similar trends, and Wagner et al. And Oliveira et al. Established a learning effect for TMTA. Now, this has an important scientific impact as it contributes to a body of literature on the reliability of trial making test A and warrants future research that includes a wider variety of cognitive tests. Now, to recap, I sought to determine the impact of chronic exercise with VR on anxiety, stress, and executive function, and I also sought to quantify enjoyment in the cohort of adolescents. And my major findings were that chronic exercise with VR was effective in reducing stress and improving executive function, but was not effective in reducing anxiety. And I also found that adolescents found exercise with VR to be more engaging than traditional exercise. And my work is novel in that I was one of the first to use Oculus Rift off-the-shelf games, such as Box VR, in a high school setting. I was also one of the first to examine the impact of exercise with VR chronically and quantify enjoyment in a cohort of adolescents. And the broader contribution of my work is that exercise with VR may provide a novel, effective, engaging, non-pharmaceutical mode to mitigate stress and improve cognitive performance with the flexibility to be administered in a school, home, or therapy setting. I would like to thank my mentor, my science research teachers, and my peers for their support. Thank you.